I had someone comment on that post and be like, well, you're a white woman in a ski town. Like, who are you to talk on this topic? And I was like, yeah, I'm a white woman. And yeah, I live in a ski town, but that's not where I'm from. Welcome to Empower and Evolve, the vortex of growth that you have been looking for. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I'm a mindset coach for female leaders, and I am committed to helping you cultivate the mindset shifts that generate you wild success. Each episode, we explore ways to tap into your true potential. We face the shadows that hold you back, and we embrace the journey toward your most abundant life. If you love what you learn here today, then I invite you to share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. Right, it's time to plunge in. Welcome to another episode. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're watching on YouTube, check out my freshly nano-bladed brows. They look kind of intense, but that's okay. They're going to wear down. Oh, my own money origin story. What a juicy topic, eh? I feel like I say this every week. I guess it's because I love choosing the topics for this podcast that feel really exciting for me and that I know will give you lots and lots and lots of inspiration, takeaways, implementable action, you name it. Like, I love talking about the topics that I love talking about. This one, I have no idea how long this episode is going to be and if I'm going to able keep it nice and short and like I normally like to keep it. So let's see. Because I want to share the most important parts that have kind of led me down this journey and have really helped me become the woman I am today. And if you follow me on social media, if you're aware, if you're on my email list, if you're aware of my offers, you know that for the last few months, I've really been stepping into the space on talking about money, sharing on money, guiding on money, which is something I've been doing behind the closed doors for a long time now with my clients, but I hadn't done it publicly yet. So it's been really fun to step into this space and actually really own it. And I've shared in some of the past episodes before, like how I've kind of gotten here. And there's going to be another episode soon where I'm going to be sharing about my journey with astrology, because that's actually one of the main reasons I've really been stepping into this space, like one of the main inspirations behind it. So stay tuned for that episode. But for now, for those of you who do understand the language of astrology, I have my Chiron placement in Cancer in the second house. And Chiron is like the wounded healer. It's one of the main wounds that we have come here to overcome in our lifetime. So, with it being in Cancer and in the second house, it has a lot to do with emotional safety around money, money wounds in general, self-worth wounds, so many iterations. And the thing with Chiron is that it's kind of the theme of your life that you're meant to overcome so that you can then also guide others in it and kind of become the guide in this role. So it's really cool to understand that now. And then I also have Jupiter in Cancer in the second house. And then there's other placements as well and aspects and stuff. So there's a lot that is leading towards me guiding people on the topic of money. So it's been really fun to step into this space and really own it. And it's been quite the journey for me and to reflect back where I started to where I am today. And I really want to share like the origin story, as in like where I grew up, because I, not too long ago, I shared a bit of a controversial post on social media, and that post said, and I'm not going to go into the depths of it. So if you don't agree, you don't have to agree. And I'm also not going to explain every single aspect of it. But one of my beliefs is that being poor is a choice. And I get it. There are so many freaking layers to it. It's not always a choice. But I do believe in personal responsibility and the fact that you do always have a choice to change your circumstances. Anyway, not without going too deep into this belief and needing to explain every single piece of it, I had someone comment on that post and be like, well, you're a white woman in a ski town. Like, who are you to talk on this topic? And I was like, yeah, I'm a white woman. And yeah, I live in a ski town, but that's not where I'm from. Like, I was born in Soviet Union, Estonia, to a single mom who had nothing, who ended up having to sacrifice a lot to look after me and herself. And then there was my grandma as well, who was basically the person who raised me. But a little bit more like my dad left my mom before I was born. They had their own issues. And, for a very long time, I carried a lot of hurt and pain around that, which I've worked through. And I'm in a good relationship with my dad. We're not super close, but we stay in touch and I love him dearly. And I'm glad that he followed his truth in that time. But that left my mom on her own with her baby during a very difficult time. And knowing that, we unconsciously pick up the stories of our whole life, and especially in those first 7 years. So being born into nothing was tough. And my mom, like I said, had to make many, many sacrifices. One of them ended up being she ended up choosing to go and work on an international cruise ship, which meant that she was away for months at a time just to be able to pay for us. And I know that that broke her heart. I've actually gone back to that memory of her telling me that, and like in some of my regression work, and I didn't even realize it was there. And then I messaged her afterwards, being like, like what happened when I was this age? Like I have this memory, and she was like, "Oh my God, that was like when I told you that I was gonna go on the boat." So early on, I picked up the belief that money is hard to come by, that money isn't for everyone, and that you had to sacrifice a lot to make money, and that you had to work really hard to make money. Fast forward a few years, my mom ended up meeting my stepdad on the boat. He was a guest and she was working and they fell in love, and it's quite the love story. He ended up like leaving the boat and then coming back a few months later and proposing to her. He's German. My mom's Estonian. And we ended up moving to Germany. Like, I was 5 years old. I was like, what's going on? Didn't speak the language, anything, It was like, whoa. But my stepdad, he is an entrepreneur. He ran his own building company and he was definitely middle class. So suddenly we went from having nothing to having a beautiful home and being able to afford things which we weren't able to afford before. So it was really interesting to have those very opposing realities come together. And I do believe that my stepdad being an entrepreneur and having his own business is partially why I am running my own business and where I kind of picked up that belief because I saw them being at home and my mom ended up working for him and life just was flexible and they were able to do lots of things and it was really, really great, like so I picked up the belief that, oh, okay, there is a different opportunity, like there's a different way to life. And bless my mom, from her own experience. She, from a very young age, started to tell me, just marry a rich man and you'll be looked after. Because that was her experience, right? She came from like having to sacrifice a lot from nothing to marrying a wealthy man who then looked after her. So that was like perfect for her. But I have been a rebel my whole life. And ever since the early days when she told me that, I was like, no, I am going to be the rich man. I am going to be the one making all the money. Because remember, I had already picked up the belief that women can do anything, we can be the breadwinners, etc. But I also had the unconscious stories of like, money is hard to come by, you have to sacrifice. So there was a lot already kind of bubbling in the surface, on the surface there, underneath the surface everywhere. A freaking interesting ride. And eventually we ended up moving back to Estonia and fast forward many, many years in like I started having some side jobs pretty early on in my life. And I really liked working. I've always been a hard worker. I was mainly working in the restaurant industry. I really liked the ability to make tips and I'm really good with people. So I was able to make pretty good tips wherever I always worked. And I love the ability to have money and buy myself nice things. So that was really cool and, great to experience. And then I went to university, which is a story for another day because I didn't want to go and study what I ended up studying, but kind of got pushed into it. And then I ended up, after university, leaving Estonia and moving abroad. I moved to London at first. And up until that point, I had not paid rent or had to kind of pay for all sorts of things myself. Like even in university, I was really privileged in the sense that my parents gave me a monthly budget. So I did kind of have to buy my own food and stuff like that. And I learned how to kind of manage the money that I was given. And I was living in my grandma's flat and I didn't have to pay rent. And back then, my then boyfriend was living with me and he was paying the utilities. Like that was kind of the deal that in order for him to live there for free, he had to pay the utilities. So that was all great. He was working, he wasn't in university, so that kind of all worked out. And then I left Estonia, moved to London, and suddenly I had to manage all the things. I had to find a rental, I had to find a new job, I had like all the things of like moving abroad, which I've done many times now. So I'm very well versed in what it takes to move to a foreign country and set yourself up, which I believe has helped me become more resilient and really great at problem solving. Um, but all the time, I knew the importance of budgeting. So I never was the person who, at the end of the month when my rent was due, I'd had no money because I'd been spending it all partying, even though I did a lot of partying during those years. I always, anytime I got paid, I would put a certain amount of money aside to make sure that I would have enough to cover my monthly expenses. Smart girl, right? So I continued living like that, and I was able to get really great at saving as well and saving enough money to go and continue traveling because I didn't move to Austria. I met my now husband, and we saved that money to go and travel to Southeast Asia for 3 months and move to New Zealand and set ourselves up there and then like work there and save up more money to go to Canada then and just like all these different things. So I was really good with making things work with money and kind of making sure that I would be able to save for what was important to me, traveling, and make enough money. And then things started to change when we came to Canada. And I don't actually fully know what it was that really changed it. Like up until that point, I never really had a credit card. Like I had a credit card, but I had one that I had to pay off every month. So I didn't have the ability to kind of go into credit card debt beforehand. And I was always really good at managing my money. But then we end up in North America. We end up in Canada and got given a credit card. And somehow within a few years, I also had started my own business, which I then got this whole big thing of personal development and investing in myself and all sorts of things. So I ended up getting myself into quite a bit of credit card debt. And I was also living paycheck to paycheck at that point. Wasn't able to save money anymore. And the one thing that I wish someone would have taught me back in those early days when I was pretty good at budgeting was to save for the future. Like I was able to save for my travels and stuff, but I never saved for the future. Like have an emergency fund or, investments, like all those things that I was never really taught about that. And it's interesting, actually, what my stepdad now, years later, has said that one of the things that he really regrets not learning during his life is learning about investing, like in stocks and stuff. They have quite a bit of real estate, and that was kind of their thing. But he never learned about stocks. And my mom, being who she was, she had no freaking clue. Bless her. So yeah, suddenly I end up in Canada. I started for the first time ever living paycheck to paycheck and digging myself into credit card debt. I believe it had a lot of it had to do with kind of starting my own business and taking a lot of time to make good money with it. Probably didn't help that my business was network marketing, which, is definitely limited in the sense of how much money you can make until you have like a really big team and you're really successful with that. And I'm not saying MLM or network marketing. I'm very grateful for all the lessons I learned from it. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for those 5 years that I spent in that industry and everything I learned. But it definitely wasn't helpful to be investing in myself heavily during that time, whilst not really making a lot of money, also because of my choices of work, being a yoga teacher, running that MLM business, and then also working in hospitality at cafes at one point, which weren't making, a lot of tips. Anyway, I find myself in this place where I have credit card debt. I live paycheck to paycheck. So does my husband, but he made better money than me. We don't really have any emergency savings. And we decide we want to buy a house. Talking to the banks, talking to a mortgage broker, we had a really big wake up moment, realizing that we were so far off with being able to buy a property, which was really upsetting. And it also gave us the motivation to make change. So at that point, I'd been starting to learn about money mindset and money through my MLM business. And my mentor was really savvy when it came to money. And she always recommended this one program that she had taken years ago that really helped her to get on top of her finances. And with the news of, realizing how badly we were doing when it came to money, I made the decision to sign up for that program. And I devoured the course content. I learned a lot about my own like unconscious beliefs around money, my money blueprint. And then I also learned a really great system to manage money. And I remember like sharing it with my husband at first and him being a little bit hesitant to like apply it. But then I did manage to get him on board. And we ended up coming up with this system, and starting to run our money through that system was again a big wake up call. But we realized how we were living above our means and how we had to make some changes. And within that system, I learned about the concept of paying yourself first and saving up emergency fund. And then once you had at least 3 months of in the emergency fund, grow it more and then take some of that money and invest it. So anyway, we started implementing this system in 2018 whilst we were both living paycheck to paycheck. And we didn't really have any support from our parents when it came to money. Like my parents, like I said, they have quite a lot of real estate, but they don't have a lot of liquid cash. And Scott's parents don't either. So they weren't able to support us financially when it came to buying a house. And considering that both our families are not from Canada, we also didn't have any co-signers. So we really had this realization that if this was to happen, we would be the ones to make it happen. So we started implementing this system, and within 4 years, we were able to not only take our life from living paycheck to paycheck to actually making a good amount of money to qualify for a mortgage, to also being able to save up the deposit for the house and still have some emergency money. It is absolutely wild to me that within 4 years we were able to do that. And during those 4 years, I became the student of money. I would take multiple courses, read multiple books on money, money managing, money mindset. And in the more recent years now, I've also learned about money energetics, which has been like a whole nother layer, which has been really fascinating and kind of like the missing piece that I was finding. And since then, so we were able to do that within 4 years. In 2022, we bought our house. And again, since then, we've had a huge leap again. Now, in this day, both my husband and I have our own corporations. My husband runs a plumbing company, and I run my coaching company. We're both incorporated. We bought a house where we would be able to also create a short-term rental out of. Like that was we didn't want to just buy a house. Like we were, like I said, we became both obsessed with learning about money and becoming financially literate. So we didn't want to just buy any house. We wanted to buy a house where we could create a short-term rental so that we could make more passive income. So we did invest quite a bit. So we still are paying off some of that debt that we made into an investment to turn our basement into a separate suite, and just in general renovating the house. But now we have a short-term rental. We both have corporations, and between the two of us and the short-term rental, we make just short of $500,000 in revenue per year, which is insane. Because in 2018, when we had that realization of where we were actually at financially, to then now in 2025, within 7 years, we were able to go from living paycheck to paycheck. Between the two of us, we were like on paper making probably just less than 100K a year, to now making close to $500,000 in revenue. Insane. And during that time, we've unraveled so many of our own limiting beliefs. We've recognized where both of our own money origin stories have come from and how different they were, and where they were also some similarities because, we both learned them from our parents, which both are from the boomer generation, which is a story for another time. But it's absolutely wild to me how far we have come. And I am not yet where I would like to be. We still have some of that debt we need to pay off for the investments in our house. I would like to have more money in stocks invested. These are all things that we're still on a journey. We're not yet at the destination, and I don't think we'll ever be, because we're both the kind of people who the goalpost always moves. But it's really, really cool to be able to take a moment and recognize how far you've come. And when I actually just take a moment and look at the story of where I've come from, where I was born to where I am today and what has gotten me here, I have a lot to share on the topic money. And it's really awesome for me to actually step into this space and start teaching on it, because everything I've learned, everything I've implemented has gotten me here. And now I get to share that knowledge with others. So if you ever look at me and you're like, oh, she's just this pretty girl, pretty white girl living in a mountain town, in a resort town. Who is she to teach me about money? She's never like had to overcome hardship. This is the story. And also during those 4 years where we were able to save up for the house, we were also able to completely pay off all of our debt. So that when we bought the house, we had zero debt. We had, the down payment to put down, a little bit extra in our emergency fund cell, all those things. In 4 years, we were able to do that. And if we can do it, anyone can do it. It just takes a little bit of unraveling. First of all, I really like to teach this through my feminine success formula, through my 3-part framework, where we start with the mindset. We actually want to start just to kind of open your mind to what is possible, as well as start to recognize where some of your own stories have come from. What are sort of some of these unconscious money stories? What is your money identity, etc.? Like, start with that. It's kind of like the awareness piece. Then we want to move into the energetics. We want to actually look at your nervous system and your ability to hold money, where your thermostat is at, which is like your certain amount of money that you attract every month, the money that you're comfortable with, both in your accounts as well as how much debt you are comfortable carrying at any given time. And then we want to start to recalibrate your nervous system to hold more, and also to create that internal safety so that if you do have lower cash months, you don't go into this panic frenzy and spiral out of control into massive financial anxiety and stress. So that's the second pillar. And then the third pillar is, once we've dealt with pillar 1 and pillar 2, that's when we want to implement a strategy of how to actually manage your money, how to manage cash flow, how to budget, how to make sure that you are saving for your future, you have an emergency fund, and all those little pieces, like how to start to create a relationship with money, all the things, like all the little pieces. Because, there's a reason why strategy is the final pillar. Because if you just implement a strategy, but you don't deal with your mindset and energetics first, you're just going to backslide. And you're not going to get where you want, because you're subconsciously going to self-sabotage yourself and just continue ending up in the same place you've always been. And I teach you this framework in my beautiful Wealth Blueprint course, which has now been launched. When you listen to this podcast, I'll make sure to have the link to it below. And I also teach this framework in a shorter, more condensed way in my Money Mind Reset, where it's more about flipping the script on financial anxiety so that you can stop spiraling out of control and actually notice all the abundance around you. So that course it's only $47. I'll have the link to that below as well, so you can check that out. But in the Wealth Blueprint, I teach you everything. We go way deeper into the mindset, into the subconscious reprogramming, into the energetics. And I actually teach you the framework and the strategy that I use both in my personal finances, the framework that got us to save up for the house, as well as the framework of how I run the finances in my business to make sure that I am handling my cash flow. All of that is going to be available to you in Wealth Blueprint. So if you're curious about any of those, check it out in the show notes. And if you love this episode, I invite you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you had a big aha moment, please message me on Instagram and share it with me. I love hearing from you. I'll catch you next time. Thank you for joining me on the Empower and Evolve podcast. I hope that today's episode has sparked a new insight, or perhaps reminded you of your own power to manifest change. If you found value in our time together, I invite you to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might need a little reminder of their own magical power. It would mean the world to me if you could take just 2 minutes to review the podcast and help it reach more people. And remember, the journey of transformation is ongoing, and sometimes The most powerful step that we can take is to simply pause, breathe, and realign with our deepest intention. Until next time.